What's going on, guys? This is Danny from Slow Restoration, and we're back to work on the Camaro here. As you can see, it's come a long ways. It's looking really good, and we have a whole box here full of parts that is going to make it look a lot better. So pretty much in that box is a complete March pulley setup to completely dress the front of this motor up and make it look like it's ready to run. So let's start pulling some parts out, laying stuff out, and we'll get busy on this. We got everything kind of loosely laid out here. We have all of our hardware, nuts and bolts, washers, studs. They even gave us water pump gaskets, and there's 4 of them, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Pulley covers, pulleys themselves, new water pump. It's an Elderbrock high flow water pump. I think it's reverse flow. So a new power steering pump, power steering pulley, of course, a brand new AC compressor with a cover for the pulley, of course a lower machined billet main balancer pulley, crank pulley. We also got, this goes to the AC compressor. Just dropped my bolts out, but that is incredibly nice, like highly chromed, polished. That's sweet. A new alternator in there with a ground strap, some brackets up there sitting on the intake, and here's what kind of holds it all together. And this is actually a really nice piece. So it's the main bracket kind of goes on here, and bolts to the motor and holds like all the accessories. It's really nice. It's got their it's black powder coat, but then they put it back in the mill and ball mill the edges. It's got their logo right in the center, and then it's clear coat over top of that. So that's a extremely nice machined aluminum piece. The finish on it is excellent. We did opt to go for a self-tensioner, so there's a kind of a universal self-tensioner, and then they just machine a billet cap cover for it. But to actually put your socket in or your ratchet in there and operate this, you have to remove this because it covers the little notch in there. But anyway, they also, of course, give us some directions, so let's get to it. So the first step is to install these studs in the block. We put a little sealer on the threads. So obviously 2 on that side, 2 on that side. The first set of gaskets get some sealer on them, and then you slip them over the studs. There is 2 of these brackets. There's a left and a right. Make sure you get them on the right way, but this particular one, they have part numbers and everything on them. They also have everything labeled really nicely and packaged extremely well. So anyway, these slip on next. They are threaded where they slip on. I'm not sure why, maybe for different applications, but they do just slip on and they slip right back. Again, this one goes on this side. Really looks killer on there. So we have a set of gaskets against the block, our spacers, another set of gaskets we'll put on there, put some sealer on, and then our water pump will go on. We got our second set of gaskets on with sealer. We'll take our water pump and slip that right on over top of these studs. So that slips right back. And now we actually have 4 of these threaded spacers. They have notches or flats, so we can tighten them up with a wrench. But this is actually kind of the nuts that hold the water pump on. So we'll get these threaded on, tighten them up with a wrench. It looks like about 9/16, and that'll secure the water pump onto the block. As it turns out, it's a 5/8 wrench on these flats. So we got that all snugged up. So now we have our water pump securely mounted. All that looks good. All right, so we get to actually install this amazing looking piece, the whole front main bracket next. So it goes on over top of the mounting studs. and you use these 3/8 by 1 inch socket head cap screws. That bolt on nice, actually really nice, fits right on. We'll make sure we wipe all these smudges and fingerprints off, but that looks killer. That's really nice. I do like this March setup because it keeps everything pulled in. It doesn't, you know, hang everything way out to the side. It's not real tall. It's compact, and it's just a nice. All right, next step is actually to mount the alternator, and this bracket back here has a thread in the outboard part. There's a bigger drilled hole with threads, and on the inside it also has threads. So what you're gonna do here is there's a bushing with a hole drilled straight through it. You're gonna use a 3/8 Allen, and you're gonna screw that in, and you're gonna adjust it. They give you a spacer here, so you're gonna adjust this until you can fit the spacer and the alternator in this space here, and adjust the play out of it so it should be tight. You don't want to, you know, tweak this bracket back as you're tightening it up. This is an adjustment to get the play out. Once you have that done, you can remove this. We'll slip this in with the alternator, and they give you a long socket head cap screw to go through this whole thing, and that will thread into the back part of this where the smaller diameter threads are. Now, this alternator does have a ground strap that bolts to it. They do a clear coat finish to keep this looking nice, and they give you this ground strap. They actually want you to take and put this to the engine block. We'll probably go right to the cylinder head and make sure that's a nice solid ground so the alternator doesn't have any issues charging. But we did get it mounted on there. We have our bushing in. The threaded piece is adjusted so there's no gap or no slack in there, and it's a nice tight fit. Nice chrome alternator. They did give us a pulley. We'll put that on later. Now we're going to move over and start mounting our AC compressor. Next, we're going to go ahead and get our AC compressor loosely mounted. There is a cover that goes over this clutch, so it's not ugly. There is a nice cover that goes over that. But the bolts that go into this are metric, and they are in a separate container that says metric. So they pretty much separated and labeled everything pretty good for us. So we'll go ahead and finish. We have the bolt here. There's a small spacer in the back, and then there's this is actually a standard bolt because it goes into the bracket. The two front bolts are metric bolts. We'll go ahead and finish that up. Next, we're going to start working on our power steering pump, get it mounted. There's a mounting bracket. There's two socket head cap screw metric bolts that go down through into the body of the power steering pump. Once we get those tightened up, this whole assembly, let me get the screw down in there first. Once we get that mounted on there, there's two 3/8 by 1 socket head cap screws that actually go through these two center holes, and this whole assembly will go right on like that, and we'll run our screws in to attach that. All right, so we're looking really good with all this stuff. now we're going to actually start making it look pretty. So we're going to start putting our pulley covers and stuff like that on. First up is the water pump pulley. There is a bushing. We're going to slip on the hub of the water pump, and that just spaces it out. So when we put this on here, it's hub centric then. We're going to spin that around till we line the 4 bolt holes up. It is multiple bolt patterns in this water pump. We'll just slip this on and just spin it till we see those 4 bolt holes line up. It gives you, I think they're 5/16 by 7/8 socket head cap screws go in there, and we'll tighten that up. All right. Obviously that looks good too. It's got the machined windows in the pulley. Next up is our crank pulley. And this is a big block, so the washer and the crank bolt stays in. This goes over top all of it. I believe on the small block, you would take that out and that would go over top of this. But with the big block, this is how it goes. It lines up in the center there. You line your bolt holes up, and they give you 3/8 by, I think, 1 inch socket head cap screws, bolts. They do recommend putting Loctite on, so we'll put some Loctite on and get them tightened up. And again, that looks killer on there. Looks really, really good. And next up is our power steering pulley. So it's 3 bolts. They give you the supplied bolts, just thread into there. Very simple. Just put it on there, line it up, tighten your bolts up. Next, same thing for the alternator over here and the air conditioner clutch. There's these bushings. They give you the supplied bolt. They are metric, and they thread in, and they make a nice little bushing to tighten up in this slotted area. Now, normally that's how you would tighten the belt adjustment, is through here and here. We do have an automatic tensioner going on this one, so I think it actually mounts right here. But so I'm not sure. We'll have to figure out where to set that for the automatic belt tensioner. But I'm sure it's a set distance in there. All right, next we have our alternator pulley set up. We're going to take what they supplied off, nut and lock washer. There's a supplied plastic sleeve that they just put on there, keep stuff from rattling around. So first step is March supplies this really nice billet fan that's machined. It's going to slip on to the alternator first. Next is the pulley itself. And then we got to put the nut and lock washer back on there and tighten all that up. And then after we're done with that, there's a nose cap that goes on, and there's 3 screws, as you can see, that thread into the pulley to hide all that. And with that on there, that looks really, really sweet. You can spin it, make sure that all that spins free and nothing's oblong or out of center. So that looks good. The last cover we have to put on is the AC compressor clutch, and depending on which compressor you get or which one they ship, it's either going to be 3 metric or standard screws. They supply both, and just grab them and see which one threads in nicely. We found ours, so we'll go ahead and install that with those 3 bolts. All right, as you can see, we're actually taking stuff back apart at this point, and that is because this kit, like I mentioned before, has an automatic tensioner that goes with it. It does have another bracket that attaches, and this is not in the directions because this wasn't part of the kit. This was an add-on. I think the newer kits might be actually shipping with this tensioner, but this particular kit, it was an add-on. So I assumed, I didn't even check it, and I was wrong. That's what you get for assuming. That this bracket was going to bolt on where these 2 blank screw holes are, and as you can see, they do not line up. I thought it was going to be like that. So what I figured out is that they have another packet of bolts. They actually they line up here, so it goes behind the bracket, and they actually give you 2 shorter studs here, or stands. So we have to pull this bracket back off, swap those 2 stands out for these, and then we can put this on behind this bracket, tighten that up, and then our automatic tensioner will go on to this bracket. And then once all that's done, we get our belt on, then we have this decorative cover that covers over the whole thing. So no huge deal. We just got to pull this bracket back off so we can swap these 2 stands out, and then we'll get it all thrown back together. So not a huge problem. We were able to figure it out even though it's not in the directions. And like I said, the reason it's not in the directions is because this was an add-on. So with that bracket removed, we have it setting on the side here. We're just going to thread these in. You can see how much shorter they are. We'll get rid of this one too. That threads on there. We'll get those snugged back up with the flat here. It's a 5/8. Again, these they're spacers. They also act as the nuts that tighten your water pump down. All right, we're all back together here now, and with that bracket on, it just sandwiches in between the bracket here and these stands, and then we can put our self-tensioner on, and it's just one bolt. There's two studs that stick off the back side. They're two different sides, so it only goes on one way. Obviously, it goes that way, and one bolt in the center tightens it up. Once we get our belt on here, everything adjusted. Of course, like I said, it does have this decorative cover, billet cover that goes right over top of that bolt, and it bolts on. And if you're not running an automatic tensioner, they do give you an adjusting tool. It's these pieces of machined aluminum. They actually fit right over the bushing. They have an end there, so that fits over nice and secure. They're threaded on this end, so you have one left, one right. You put them on. I'm not even going to open it because we're not going to use it, but here's the adjuster. It's threaded, so it fits in between these, and then once you have this adjusted on there, you can spin this, and this will adjust both sides at once and put the right tension. You can get the right tension however tight you want it on there, and then just snug these up, going right through the hole. You can still get a wrench through there. So this is a really nice setup too, but with the automatic belt tensioner, it's infinitely adjustable. So once we get the right belt on there, it'll just do whatever it needs to keep the proper tension. That pretty much completes our setup here. We do have to get the proper size belt. I'm not 100% sure what that's going to be. I actually have to call March and see. The belt size they give you in the directions is for one without a self-tensioner. So we'll have to get the correct one in, and I'll call them now, and I'll try and give you the part number, and we'll try and finish up this video with the belt on. While we're waiting to hear back from them, it's always a good idea just to take a visual. I mean, obviously there's nothing in the way here, so just sight up, make sure everything looks like it lines up, and it does. You can see the crank pulley down there lines up with the alternator. Alternator lines up with power steering. The water pump is the back of the belt, so there's no grooves on it, but that lines up. Tensioner seems to line up, and the AC compressor also lines up, and we can also grab everything and spin it freely. Obviously the crank isn't going to spin freely. All of this spins freely. Nothing looks like it's wobbling or out of place. One piece I didn't show yet, this piece here is the AC lines adapter that goes to the compressor. You're going to pop this plug off, and then this will bolt down in there with O-rings, and that puts a nice shiny, amazing looking piece that puts your line straight down, so we can come down around and go behind the fender into there for our vintage air. I'm not going to put this on yet because we're not ready to crack this compressor. Right now it's sealed. We'll just kind of let it sit here. But don't do that until you're ready to hook all this up. So that is a really, really nice setup. Like I said, it's nice and compact. It's probably more compact than the factory system, and it's very sturdy. It mounts these things extremely well, and it's show quality. Very, very nice piece for March. So we did get a belt, and we got it put on there, and it turns out that you pretty much run the adjustment all the way in, and the belt that they give you for this application is still correct for the automatic tensioner. So it keeps tension on it. You're running. You could move these out a little bit, but there's a little bit better space if you run them there, and it keeps all this kind of compacted a little bit more. So again, extremely nice setup here. Everything fit extremely well, bolted right on, so it looks good. Check out March, top notch. I didn't want to put this video up before actually getting the belt on there and knowing exactly which one, so we're going to put this at the end. So if you comment and say, can't believe I posted this without the belt, then I know you didn't watch the whole thing. All right, guys, thanks for stopping by. We got a lot more to come with this car. That's just one more piece to the puzzle. But if you like the content, please subscribe. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good day.